Okay, a bit of a different project this time. In fact, it's not even really a whole project, it's only half a project. This is the carcass of a 4-drawer dresser. It is old, it is stained, there's chipped veneer on it. There's the side really has chipped veneer here at the bottom. It's not particularly valuable, but it's sentimental to a friend of ours. And she wants to keep it as opposed to throwing it out. However, but it's not a restoration. What she would like me to do, and what we're going to attempt, is I'm going to cut the bottom drawer off. So I'm going to cut the whole thing here, and I'm going to build a new bottom, just an open modern type bottom, and do any sort of patching or as needed, and then she's going to paint it. So today it's hacking old furniture with art for fun. I've never done something like this before. We'll see. I'll throw up the SketchUp plan here. I did just do a quick rough outline just so that the client and myself were on the same page with what we're going to do. And in the SketchUp plan, I just show the top 3 drawers, and then I show the very, very plain bottom support that I'm going to build. I think the first thing I'm going to do though is cut this, because if that goes wrong, we're in real big trouble. And I think I'm going to do it on the table saw. This would be a good thing for a track saw. I don't have a track saw. I have a circular saw with like a cutoff board, but it's not going to give a very nice cut. And the sides are plywood, and I'm concerned about it chipping up. So here's the face frame, and then here, this side, oh, I don't even think that's a 1/4 inch. I think this is maybe an 1/8 of an inch veneer plywood over the side. So there's cross pieces there, cross pieces there. You know, this is factory furniture from the early part of the century, I'm thinking. Here's a close-up of the bottom, and you can just see how thin the plywood is that's on the side. This is one of the support structures, and then just this thin veneer plywood over the sides. I've been practicing what I want to do. I've been moving it over the table saw, trying to figure it out how I want to slide it over the blade, and if I wanted to change my mind. And one of the issues is that there's this lip here where the top sticks out, and I'm trying to figure it out. It's like, now it doesn't stick past the back, so for the back it's not a problem, it'll just slide. But when I'm cutting the sides, I'm like, oh, that's going to be a problem. But it just so happens that I have never put in an infill piece of plywood on this side of my table saw, so there's a gap there, and the top from this dresser can stick down into the gap. And in fact, you know, the back of the table saw is above the fence rail here, so I can just slide it right. I can just slide it right past. I measured from the top down to the bottom of this cross piece, because that's where we want it to cut. And this is 22 5/16. Not that that matters, but I've got it set on the fence, and I've got this checking it visually against the saw blade. Looks like we're in the right location. So here's the bottom all cut off, and there was this bar across the back which I've replicated in maple, and I need to fit that in here. But first I need to do just a little bit of trimming. I'm using pocket holes for fitting in this in. With a repair job like this, it's hard to really do anything else. Okay, I heard that, something split. So I heard a nice little crack when I was putting in the one screw. And yeah, there's a tiny little crack here in the grain. And then when I started on the other side, again, I heard a crack, so I backed that one out. Getting, when you're right at the edge of this old wood, so I'm just gonna leave it with one screw holding this in, and then I need to put some screws along the back, and I think that'll be good enough because again, we're putting a subframe for the base, and then I'll be fastening that in, so that should be holding it nice and rigid. But one other thing is I happen to be moving it around and it's like, this popped right out. So I'm gonna stop now and put a bit of glue in there. It's not much of a tenon, but again, I'll be putting a sub base on, so I need this glue to hold well enough for me to get the sub base on, and the sub base will be attached all the way around. So time to take a break. All right, this should be dry, and I also put a bit of glue on the side and here. So this is like a 75, 80-year-old cabinet. It's had a hard life, and so it's kind of a bit not entirely square. So when I was feeding it through the table saw, it actually wiggled a bit. So I fitted in a few patches here with some epoxy, because again, it's going to be painted. So I've put it back on the table saw. I'm not entirely happy with the bottom here. I know I added a few pieces there, as I just said, but there's a piece here where it's a little out of whack, and I think it just shifted a bit the first time through. So now I've got the table saw set, and I'm just got the blade here, and I'm just gonna take a skimming cut all the way around, and that should clean it up. There, like it barely touches the blade. Okay, got it on my table saw, and I think that's better. Nice and pretty flat, which is all I expect, is pretty flat. This side is pretty good. This side is pretty good. But here I gotta patch the veneer. I actually ripped this veneer off part of the side that I cut off the bottom, and I'm going to, it's a bit thinner, but I'm thinking that I'm going to maybe trim this and try to cut a piece in here. I'm going to try and cut something fairly straight here. Let's get this cut to size. Here it's still lifting a bit, so let's just squeeze some glue under there. Let's get that in there. And here. And then the next day when everything is dry, still looks pretty ugly, but the question is how does it feel? It doesn't need to look nice, needs to just feel nice. That feels pretty good. Clean up the sides a little bit. So I think the next thing to do is to work on the base. And to do that, I prepared some maple, and I'm going to rip that into 1.5-inch strips and then start working on the legs. Using my doweling jig to drill dowel holes in the base frame. A little dab of glue in each hole. Not usually an issue because the dowel is a precision jig, so everything is usually pretty square, but you still are going to check. And then put it aside and do the other one. And again, check it for square. Looking good. And the next day, these are nicely dried, so we can proceed with the next step. So the previous joints, the dowels were going in like this. Plenty of depth in the wood. But now I'm drilling into the face of the board. Here's a scrap piece, so there's actually not that much depth. So I've set the drill bit a bit shallower for all of these drilling operations, and then later when I'm drilling into the ends of the cross pieces, I'll have to actually reset the drill to drill a bit deeper. I have to reset my jig for a moment. There. Now it will clamp here. You can see how the glue will squeeze out. It works its way up the flutes in the dowels, so it's all nicely packed in all around it. Check for square. So I got it out of the clamps, and it's looking like I want it to. Next thing I'm going to do is a bunch of sanding before I fit it in place. Now, it's upside down now. Here, let me get the camera closer. Especially here on the sides, even though it's going to be painted, you're not going to be able to hide the fact that there's a join. So when I sand it, I'll be putting just a bevel here. Not a big one, just a tiny little bevel there, and I'll probably sand a similar bevel here, and you'll just make a little shadow line there. You can't hide it, so you might as well show it as just a detail line. Also here, the front of the dresser, there's some deep scratching, so I'm going to do some sanding, heavy sanding on the front edges here before I set about getting it attached. So I spared you a lot of the sanding because, yeah, the old dresser needed a fair bit of sanding. So I think the next thing is to attach it. I think I got a little bit ahead of myself because I can't really fit a drill in between these cross pieces. I should have drilled these holes before I did it. So I think the next best thing is that I'm going to drill down from above, and then I'll try to at least get the countersink in to sort of get that, and then we shall see. Then we shall see. And unfortunately, I lost the audio on the next several clips, so I'm just going to have to narrate through the actions, and you'll have to use your imagination for the sound effects. As I mentioned, I drilled mounting holes from the top of the base frame, and then I managed to shorten up on one of my countersink sets, and I could just fit that between the two cross pieces using my right angle impact driver. Now, an impact driver is not the best for drilling, but when all you have is a hammer everything starts to look like a nail. I then place the frame onto the cabinet and use a nail to mark all the hole locations on the cabinet itself, and then I drilled pilot holes there. With old wood, you really want to drill pilot holes to avoid splitting. I next tapped in a few tiny nails into the bottom of the cabinet and clipped off the heads. This leaves a little barbed point sticking up. And then after applying glue, when you mount the base, it will help lock things into place so that it will not slip around on the glue while you're clamping it in place for screwing it down. I dipped the tip of each screw in some wax to help them drive home. Again, I was really concerned about splitting in this old wood, and it worked good. I used the long bit for my pocket hole jig to help with driving the screws home, since it helped with clearing the upper cross piece. And with that, my project is half complete. But that's all that I was going to do. I've hacked apart the dresser, I've put a new base on it in the minimalist modern style that she wanted. My friend is now going to take this and prime it and paint it. And yeah, thanks for stopping by. Hope you found something interesting watching me fumble my way through this. On the whole, I'm really happy with how it turned out. I mean, with cutting off the bottom of the old cabinet, I got a nice clean cut. Took a bit of doing, but I got it. And then after building the base, again, I got a nice clean joint where the two pieces meet. And that's all we really needed. It was a fun challenge. I mean, I've never done something like this before, and I learned a bunch, and I had fun doing it. And one last little shot. Here it is with the drawers in it. I'm sorry I can't show it to you when it's painted. If you follow me on Instagram, link in the description, I'll post a picture there when my friend gets it done.